I'm super excited to be continuing our bucket list series. This is a series I've wanted to do for years. It's just a personal favorite concept that I love. A bucket list is a list of things that you want to do before you die. And it's designed to help you not waste your life. And that's what this series is all about. If I could say one thing to my kids, if I could teach our church one thing, it's don't waste your life. Don't waste your life. And it's such a big deal to me. In week one, we talked about the mindset that you need to make a successful bucket list. And we taught the specific concept, start with the end in mind. You can't get to a destination if you don't know where you're going. And when you start with the end, you can map out how to get there. I hope you took me up on my challenge. I hope some of you spent some time thinking about the end that you wanted, because this was all about preparing to make the actual bucket list. And I think lots of us have silly things on our bucket list that don't actually get us where we want to go. And that's why starting with the end in mind is just so important. So I don't want you to waste your life. Last week, Zachary brought a great message talking about how Jesus wants a relationship with you, not a religion with you. And we focused on how you can be blessed by others by getting into relationships and life groups. And this week, I want to talk about the other side of relationship. See, last week we talked about how when you're in a relationship, others can pour into you. This week, I want to talk about how you can be a blessing to others. See, this was something that was really important to Jesus. He made sure that in his life, he was investing in and making other people better at life. And getting into a relationship with people so they can bless you and pour into you, that's good. That's level one of relationships. That's exactly what I wanted Zachary to teach on because I wanted him to set the foundation for this week, right? And after you get into a relationship with people, after they pour into you, after you begin to learn the things of God in your life for a period of time, you reach this place where you're like, man, I'm ready to step into the mission of God in my life, step into level two. Real fulfillment, I think, comes when you begin being a blessing to others. God wants to bless the world through you. And I think this is one of the big things on Jesus's bucket list. He didn't just want to hang out with other people. He wanted to develop and mentor other people. He wanted to make them better so that they could change the world. This is a subtle but important thing. See, I think most of us spend our lives concerned about other people pouring into us. That's what we do. We spend most of our lives worried about what other people think of us and how much fun we have with other people and how much people like us. Jesus lived to make others better regardless of what they thought of him. And today I have one simple point. It's a one-point message, but I actually have 3 sub-points to my 1 point. And then I have some sub-points to my sub-points because you guys are so smart and I'm a pastor. I figured I can do that, right? I do what I want. But here's the main point, okay? Help others be better, not just be liked by others. I think it's such a big deal for us. I mean, it sounds so simple, but for a lot of us, we don't understand this in our life. Practically speaking, we want others to invest in us. We want others to like us. But how often is our life oriented around making other people better at life? I really believe that choosing to make other people better is key to having a satisfying life. And the problem is, most of us spend most of our time worried about what other people think of us, right? I mean, we worry about like manicuring our social media pages. It's 2018, and I'm going to be honest. Like the amount of time we spend on Instagram, it's like addicting. The discovery, page on there is like interesting, and I look at a lot of surfing videos. I love surfing. That's great. But here's the thing. At the end of my life, it's not like I'm going to be like, oh man, I know my loved ones are here with me and I'm on my deathbed, but I want to ask you guys to leave the room for a little bit because I want to spend some time with my social media posts. You know what I mean? Like, I just like to spend some time remembering what I posted in 2016. 2016, I went to the Grand Canyon and I had a selfie stick, and I posted a picture of the Grand Canyon with my head obstructing a third of the view. And I got over 100 likes. That was the first time that happened, and I just like to spend some time with that because that's what makes me feel complete. So you guys, loved ones, you leave. I just want to marinate on myself. No, nobody's going to do that. That's not what we do. That's ridiculous. Yet if you tabulate the amount of emotional effort and time we put into making people like us and pour into us, it would seem like that's the most important thing. But listen. When I talk to people at the end of their lives, they're never like, man, I'm so glad I'm so loved, right? No. That's not what people say on their deathbed. They say, did my life make a difference, right? That's what people want. Did my life make a difference? Are other people better? They're not like, oh man, do other people love me? No. They know they're going to pass out of this world. Other people's love at that point is irrelevant. What matters is, did my life make the world a better place? That's what people want to know about. Such a big deal. It's consistently the concern that I encounter when I visit dying people. And the good news is Jesus was total pro, game changer at making people better. I mean, in the 3 years of his ministry was only 3 years, he invested in these 12 guys, mostly teenagers, mostly uneducated. And he developed them into the most actualized, world-changing, heroic people of all time. And I say that, and I know I use a superlative there, of all time, but it's actually true. They were the greatest of all time. They were. The disciples have changed the world as a matter of statistical fact more than anyone else in human history. I mean, you think about it, wow, the 12 disciples started the Christian movement? Yeah, that's actually true. I remember being in my young 20s. I want to start with a little story here. I remember being in my young 20s. And FYI, I found, a lot of people I encounter find the young 20s to be the worst time of your life. I know all the movies say, hey, it's the best time ever, you know, college, all this stuff. I'm telling you, life just keeps getting better, okay? I look back at my young 20s and I'm like, that was not actually that fun. I mean, marriage is great. Married with kids, even though I don't make it sound that way, is actually better. And from what I understand, having grandkids is the absolute best. So I just want you to know, if you're young, the best is yet to come. But in my young 20s, I worked at this church in Dallas, Texas, and we had 8 full-time youth staff at this church. 8 full-time youth staff. Very staff-heavy church, a lot of staff. Okay, we had 4 guys, we had 4 girls. The 4 guys lived in this house that the church owned, and kitty corner from that, the 4 girls lived in this other house that the church owned. This is seems like a really cool situation, right? I mean, community and all this stuff. All of us were so unhappy, lonely, unfulfilled, and just unhappy. And it's mind-blowing to me because here are a bunch of people the same age with the same beliefs, working on the same job and the same mission together. I mean, there should be a recipe for great community, but what we were doing is we were sitting in rooms, lonely, feeling sorry for ourselves, wondering why nobody was reaching out to us. Oh, I wish somebody would reach out to me. I wish somebody would pour into me. I wish somebody would invest in me. I wish what's wrong with me? I mean, why isn't anybody texting me? Why isn't anybody initiating something with me? I'm just so lonely. And what's crazy is any one of us could have addressed the issue, right? But we're all sitting there wondering, why is someone else not pouring into me? Why am I not being pursued, right? And I think this characterizes the feelings of so many people today, right? Not just millennials, but I talk with a lot of older adults whose children are no longer in constant need of care. You know, they're growing up, they're getting ready to be empty nesters, and they're like, oh, my kids drove themselves to school this morning. I don't know what to do. Like, what do I do? My life is meaningless. It's purposeless. I'm so lonely, right? Listen. Last week, Zachary talked about the benefits of being in a relationship. This week, I want to show you how to live like Jesus and make other people better, because what I want to do is I want to teach you to be a part of the solution to loneliness. Instead of feeling bad about the problem, I want to equip you to do something about the problem, because if you're feeling this way, there's a pretty good chance that a lot of the American populace today also feels this way. We are in what's called a crisis of friendship in 2018. We have fewer close relationships than ever before in American history. That's a big deal. It's a big problem. And I think this talk is so important, because I don't want our church just to be relational consumers. I want us to be world changers. And I think the problem is everybody loves the idea of making people's lives better. They're just like, yeah, I need someone to come up to me and tell me, please make my life better, right? That's what I need. I just need people to come to me and tell me to do that. I mean, if they did, then I would do that, right? No. Listen, if you want it, you got to go out there and get it. And this is key to having a high level of life satisfaction. I want to show you today specifically how to do it in a practical, simple, and applicable way. Now, Jesus shows us how to live a life that makes people better. He does this in 3 specific ways in the Bible that I'm going to show you some vignettes of. We're going to look at Jesus' relationship with a guy named Thomas, who's affectionately known by the populace today as Doubting Thomas. I think it's a really unfortunate nickname, because Thomas was actually one of the most effective of Jesus' disciples after Jesus ascended into heaven. He started the St. Thomas Christian movement in India, which still exists today. He's perhaps the 3rd most effective disciple after Peter and John. And it was all because Jesus was a specific kind of friend who had a specific kind of relationship with Thomas, where he was focused on making Thomas a better person. See, Thomas was not great in the beginning. He had a lot of character defects, but Jesus invested in him in such a way that Thomas became one of the most effective Christians of all time. Today, I want to look at his life so we can see how Jesus did this. The first thing that Jesus did is he made his life better in 3 ways. Yep. He pursued people consistently, specifically Thomas. This is such a huge deal to me, right? When I'm living in Dallas, I was feeling so lonely. You know, I was sitting in my room saying, oh, I wish somebody would just pursue me. But the truth was, I could have pursued people in my life, right? I could have been a part of the solution instead of just sitting there wishing that somebody would do something, right? When you read the biographies of Jesus' life and the collection of books that we call the Bible, right? The Bible is a big collection of different books. And there's 4 biographies of Jesus' life in there. We consistently see Jesus pursuing people. He was a big-time pursuer. And I want you to kind of see how he does it. One of the first images we have of Jesus being a pursuer is Luke chapter 6, verse 12. It says, one day soon afterward, Jesus went on a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God all night. at daybreak, he called together all of his disciples, and he chose 12 of them to be apostles. Here are their names. One of them was Thomas. What's interesting to me is Jesus goes to these people, he pursues them, and he initiates a relationship with them, right? He initiates, he says, hey, I want to take our relationship to the next level. Okay, I want to see our friendship become something that's a little bit deeper than it is. He was an initiator. And pursuing to me, it means it's such a simple thing, right, to be an initiator. But most of us don't do it. Most of us don't do it. Listen, do you like being invited places? I know I do, right? And I just think, man, I should treat others the way I want to be treated. I want to be an initiator, an inviter. And listen, I don't always want to hang out. But like when I see the whole church staff on Instagram hanging out at somebody's house, I'm like, oh, everybody's there except me. That's great. I love that. Thanks, guys, right? It's awesome. You're all fired. Just kidding. Listen, I don't always want to hang out because I got young kids and whatever, and I got kids coming out my eyeballs. But the truth is, I like being included, right? We're in this crisis of friendship. People have fewer and fewer friends. And here's the truth. We thought that social media, custom news feeds, and smartphones would make us all feel more connected. But the truth is, it has robbed us of the courage to pursue and initiate friendships. We're in an age where we are desperate. The world is desperate for people to live like Jesus and become actual pursuers and initiators. Pursuing also, to me, it means asking questions and listening. Jesus was such a question asker in the Bible. Did you know in the Bible, Jesus asks 307 questions, but he only answers 3 in the Bible? He's one of those people who wasn't a me monster. He listened, he asked questions, he wanted to know people. And I actually think this is really critical. Right? You don't walk up to somebody and say, hey, listen, I'm going to give you a bunch of advice, tell you how to make your life better. Okay, you go. No. First, you get to know somebody. First, you invest in somebody. First, you listen to somebody and you hear what they have to say, right? And this is such a major struggle for us today. I've been on some dates before I met Chris, and there were a couple girls I took out, a few girls that I took out specifically that, man, they were total me monsters. Like, I remember going out with them, and at the end of our date, like, they initiated, which I don't like. They said, man, I love your time together, and I just love everything about you. And in my mind, I was like, but why? I just sat and listened to you talk for 2 hours, and I literally said nothing. Like, you just motor mouthed for the last 2 hours while I thought about what I do if ninjas broke in the room, which would probably be like, just kill me. Get me out of here, please. Jesus, take the wheel, right? I really want you to think about your conversations right now. When you're in a conversation with somebody, what percent of the time are you talking? And what percent of the time are they talking? This is a big deal. I mean, Jesus has a 307-3 ratio of questions versus answers. I just want you to think about your life for a moment, right? Do you ask questions? A lot of times, I'm like, yeah, I ask questions all the time. But what I'm really doing when they're talking is I'm thinking about, I want to interject and tell this story, right? I'm not actually listening and caring about what they're saying. It's such a big deal. Right? And if you want to make people better, you got to know them. You got to take the time to invest in them by knowing them and pursuing them. I love it when people ask me questions, and I realize they probably love it too. So treat others the way you want to be treated. I just look at a picture of our staff. I love our church staff. I hope you guys do too. I photoshopped these two in here because we didn't have them in. I did a pretty good job. I put them on in there, made their heads a little big, but whatever. It's cute. Okay, that's our church staff. And we have one of the most unexperienced and uneducated church staffs in the area, right? But I think we have one of the most effective teams. And I love our team, and I think most of our church loves our church staff. And I think it's because we have a bunch of people who are good at pursuing by asking questions. If there's one core quality that we look for when we're interviewing, I say, I want somebody who is emotionally intelligent enough to pursue people and invest in people by asking questions and listening. Pursuing also means giving encouragement and compliments. Jesus encouraged throughout the Bible. He would affirm traits that he loved in people. How often do we take the time to give meaningful encouragement to people, right? We think making people better means here are the things you're doing wrong. No. I think a lot of times making people better means encouraging people. I have a friend of mine. We're not we don't hang out all the time. He's quite a bit older than me. But he will call me like at least once a month, and he'll leave like a 2-minute long voicemail on my phone in which he tells me what a good job I'm doing. And I hear the description of what he's saying. I'm like, I'm not actually doing that good a job, but those compliments make me want to try and do that good a job, right? It makes me want to be better. I just really appreciate it. I just think we live in an era where people are constantly looking for affirmation. But question, do you give as many compliments as you wish you got? Question, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated right there. Finally, pursuing means not being afraid of rejection. And this is tough. This is tough because I think a lot of us, we want to be initiators. We want to be question askers. We want to be compliment givers, but a lot of us, we don't do it because we're afraid of rejection. You know, I bet you Jesus was afraid of rejection too. I mean, he had to deal with it, right? I mean, he calls the 12 disciples and they all said yes, but there's a story in Mark chapter 10 of Jesus calling another guy, and that disciple, potential disciple, looks at Jesus and he's like, nah, I got other stuff I want to do. See you, bro. Right? And he's out of there. Now, I'm sure Jesus didn't like being rejected, but he knew you can't develop people. You can't make the world a better place if you don't put yourself out there and risk a little bit, right? And I just believe Jesus benefited so much from being a pursuer. The cost is low and the benefit is high. And at the end of our lives, we're not going to sit there and think, man, I'm so glad I never got rejected ever. I'm so glad I played it safe just watching Fox News all day long, worrying about alien invasions and eating double-decker oatmeal cream pies while eating Ben & Jerry's and crying because I was so lonely. But I was never rejected. Worth it, right? No, absolutely not, right? At the end of our life, we're going to say, I wish I would have been more of a courageous pursuer, right? That's what we're going to say. I wish I would have pursued relationships with people more. Put it on your bucket list. The second thing Jesus did to make Thomas better, and this is a big deal. He pursued people. He also let go of offense quickly. This is such a big deal. You see, Jesus calls Thomas, and Jesus and Tommy Gunn, they cruise around for 3 years doing miracles like a boss, okay? It's an amazing tour. They got their coach bus. It's awesome. It's legendary. It's triple platinum. It's amazing. And towards the end, Jesus starts telling them, hey, guys, P.S., we're going to go back to Jerusalem and I'm going to die. And the disciples are like, what? And then Jesus actually goes back to Jerusalem and he does, in fact, get crucified, right? So he dies. And then he told them he's going to rise from the dead. And 3 days later, he actually does that. And he appears to the disciples and they're like, wow, it's awesome, right? But Thomas wasn't there. And it says in Luke 20:24, one of the disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. So they came and went to him and they said, hey, we've seen the Lord. But Thomas was like, nah. I don't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands. Put my fingers into them, and I place my hands into the wound in his side. Now, this is pretty offensive. It might not seem that way to you. I want you to think about this for a moment with me, okay? Thomas is one of Jesus' best friends, okay? Best friends. And I would tell you, it's pretty culturally inappropriate to throw shade at somebody who's dead, right? I mean, when Barbara Bush died, there was this professor at Fresno State University who said all these horrible things about a woman who had just died while her family was still grieving. And the whole country, even if they were political enemies of Barbara Bush, were like, that's a little salty. That ain't right. And listen, Thomas was Jesus' best friend. He wasn't even a political enemy. I mean, he was one of his best friends. And he's like, Jesus is a fraud. Jesus is the worst. Jesus isn't real. Jesus, he hears about this, or knows about it because he's God. He doesn't get triggered. There's no Twitter rant, okay? Jesus handles it differently, okay? And this is what I want you to understand. Jesus handled conflict effectively. Such a big deal to find a healthy way to handle conflict in our life. We live in an era where people are so desperate for this. The very next verse, it says, 8 days later, I want you to remember, for 8 days, Thomas has been throwing shade at Jesus. They're all like, Jesus is alive. And Thomas is like, no, he ain't. He's not real. I don't believe in him. For 8 days, he's throwing shade at Jesus. And Jesus has a couple different options to deal with the conflict, right? Number one, he can do what everybody does. He can go to his friends and be like, did you see what Thomas said to me on Snapchat last night, right? Totally betraying, stabbing me in the back. He doesn't even care about the things of God anymore. I heard he's partying with all those people, saying I'm a fraud, getting wasted with all the partiers, totally unfit for leadership. That Thomas can't believe he's one of the 12. I'm just going to have to go to my father, the boss, talk about Thomas, get him removed, right? Because he's unfit. How can he be a Christian and talk like that? And what that is rebelling. What I just did, that's rebelling against God's best for you. That's called sin. That's gossip, right? And I feel like that's a big struggle that we have in the church. If there's one thing that I think stymies the work of God and a community of people, it's gossip like that. I mean, I hate it. I hate it, right? It's not effective. It's not an effective way to handle offense. Thomas can also unfriend him and block him. He can be like, I'm not going to go to life group anymore because Thomas is a leader and he's unfit. And if that's what this is, church and life group, and I'm done. I'm out. I mean, Thomas is not fit, right? He could do that too. But instead, Jesus takes a page from his own book, Matthew chapter 18. He says, I'm going to handle offense the way that I myself teach people to handle offense. I'm going to go directly to the person. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not call up the pastor's wife and tell her what happened. Don't do this. I'm going to go straight to the source. And this is what I got to say to him. I'm going to confront him directly. He says, the doors were locked. 8 days later, the doors were locked, but suddenly as before, Jesus was standing among them. And he's like, I'm back. And then he said to Thomas, gotcha. No, just kidding. He said, put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand in the wound in my side. Okay, and what he's doing, okay, this is a really humble, the cultural nuance within here. Jesus is essentially saying, hey, Thomas, I want to sweep my side of the street clean. I'm not mad at you. I just want to do whatever it takes to restore our relationship. I'm sorry, if I wasn't clear enough, forgive me. I want to make this right. I was real when I said I'd be back, and I want you to do what it takes so that we can have a friendship again. And that's why Jesus was able to develop Thomas. I mean, can you imagine at this point if he just walked away from him saying, oh, we're done here, it's over. We would have missed out on one of the greatest Christian movements of all time, right? It would have been done. But Jesus said, you know what? I'm going to get over offense because I care about developing you more than I care about my own pride. You can't develop people if you hold on to offense. And think about the things we get offended. We live in one of the most offended eras of all time. I mean, people, leave reviews for like, oh, I can't believe, that restaurant, blah, 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 blah. And they kicked a goose outside the restaurant, and I just hate, and bird poop and all this. It's like, are you serious? You're getting offended over this stuff? Like, what is wrong with you, right? We get offended over like, she should have texted me back by now. We're done, right? I can't believe they went to her side of the family for Mother's Day. She calls herself a daughter-in-law. I'm the mother-in-law, right? Why would she bring dessert when I told her to bring salad? We can't get over this, right? I can't believe he lifted with Brent instead of me. We're the protein pals. We're the ones who get swole together. What's wrong with him, right? We get offended. Listen, so many of our relationships are stifled because we think about ourselves instead of them. You don't have to take an offense. Nobody's holding a gun to your head saying, hey, you know what? You need to get offended or I'll kill you. No. You always, always, always choose. You make a decision to get offended. You make a decision to get offended at that guy at work. You don't need to do it. It's only ruining your day. Probably had nothing to do with you anyway. And even if it did, just apologize and move on. One of the big things that Jesus does to handle offense quickly is he gives them the benefit of the doubt. It's a big deal. You see, a lot of times when I'm arguing with Kristen, I think, this woman is trying to make me mad. That's what she's doing. She woke up this morning with the personal goal of ruining my life. That's not true, right? See, I should give her the benefit of the doubt and say, even though it seems like she's trying to make me mad, she's probably got some inner issues that she's working out, okay? Jesus didn't sit there going, oh yeah, Thomas woke up this morning trying to ruin my life. He just hates me so much. Like, he just stabbed me in the back because he hates me. No. He gave Thomas the benefit of the doubt. He's like, Thomas was probably just afraid. I mean, it is pretty traumatic watching your best friend get crucified on a Roman cross. That's that's a big deal. Like, I'm just going to pursue him again. Thomas was deeply impacted because Jesus chose not to get offended. He chose to develop him and love him. He handled conflict biblically. I want you to think hard about your life right now. How are you handling offense? How are you handling conflict? Are you doing it the way Jesus teaches us to, by going to the person instead of everyone around the person, or shutting down and not talking? It doesn't surprise me when people who don't claim to follow the morality and teaching of Jesus are cruel to others that they disagree with. That makes sense. We see it all over the world, right? People, politically just cruel and hateful and whatever and all, whatever. It makes sense to me. I understand that. But when people claim to follow Jesus, that we believe that every single human being, color, race, religion, every one of them is stamped with the image of God. Why would we dehumanize people and treat people poorly? Why would, in our own church, why would we choose to gossip sin against not just people, but the very work of Christ in our lives? Why would we choose to do that, right? I mean, if we're doing that, can we just deal with it? Developing people is rewarding, it's life-changing. At the end of our lives, we're going to look back and be grateful, but it requires pursuit, and it requires dealing with offense the way that God teaches us to. I just love that 2,000 years before social sciences discovered excellent conflict management, Jesus teaches us how to handle it in a way that is effective, and then he modeled it effectively. If you want to develop people, if you want to make your life better and their life better, you got to learn to deal with conflict effectively. Here's the last thing that I got to share with you, okay? Jesus pursued people. He let go of offense quickly. And number 3, he cut to the heart. Jesus always cut to the heart, okay? This is the one I personally struggle with a lot, is cutting to the heart. I'll explain what this means here, okay? So Jesus appears to Thomas. He says, have faith. And then finally he says, don't be faithless any longer. Believe. And Thomas is like, you're God, okay? You're back from the dead. Got it. We're good. I struggle so much with cutting to the heart. I struggle so much with just shallow conversation. I'm a great small talker. I do great with small talk. In Dallas, one of the biggest reasons why we had shallow, disconnected friendships is because all we ever talked about was jackets and cars and shoes and pyramid schemes, right? Today, I struggle getting beyond boats. Like, that's like the number one. If you talk with me, the number one thing that we probably talk about is boats. That's like, I love boats. That's what I talk about. I'm not saying it's bad to talk about boats and hobbies and whatever. Listen, once in a while, if you want to have deep relationships, you got to have deep conversations. If I want friendships that last more than a lifetime, I got to talk, or last a lifetime, I got to talk about things that span a lifetime. I got to talk about things that are actually important. Our spiritual life, marriage, okay? Our emotions. We got to really care and talk about things that matter. Jesus consistently brought people to the heart of issues, right? There's a story in the Bible of Jesus getting to know this lady. And she's been married 5 times, okay? You ever been to the same person's wedding 5 times? I've been to the same person's wedding 3 times. 5's a lot, though. Right? And the man she's with now isn't her husband. And Jesus is like, look, we're friends. I'm just going to cut to the heart of the issue and say, I think you have a problem with men. And before you move on to this next man, I want to challenge you to take some time to maybe deal with some issues in your heart. Right? I mean, it cuts to the heart. I'm just so thankful that he was like that. For this guy who's a rich young ruler, he just cuts to the heart. He says, hey, dude, we could have a great, team up time together, and I know you could invest in my ministry in a big way, but you know what? I think you got an issue with money. And I love you so much that I actually want to confront that in your life, because I think you love money more than anything else, right? With Thomas, he says, hey, man, I could just ignore the problem. We could just, talk about sailing and fishing and whatever, because we're fishing buds. Thomas and Jesus were fishing buddies. But instead, this is what he says. He says, hey, I think I got an issue with faith. And I just want to confront that right now. I want to cut to the heart. I think this is such a huge issue today. I see so many unfulfilled relationships that do not last because we never cut to the heart. And I'm not saying it's bad to talk about jobs and sports and hobbies, right? Those aren't bad to talk about. But when all of our relational utility and effort is spent extracting money from our friends through multi-level marketing, or it's spent talking about boats and guns, or whatever it is that we talk about and do, and we never cut to the heart. We never ask someone how they're doing spiritually, how they're doing in their marriage, how they're doing emotionally. Of course, we should not be surprised that our relationships do not endure, right? I mean, we live in an era, of course, where friendships and relationships do not endure. They don't endure. They feel shallow and unfulfilling. People aren't better because of them. Jesus ultimately changed the world through 12 uneducated teenagers because he cut to their hearts and he molded them into amazing, confident, world-changing human beings. I remember when I had just moved from Dallas to Minnesota, and I had just started dating this legendary girl in the community. Her name is Kristen Walter. Everybody wanted her, but I won her in a duel with guns. And she was my, that was a lie. That last part, not true, okay? But anyway, she was my steady. We were going steady. I don't know what they call it these days, but I pinned her with my letters. She was mine. And I was being the person I normally was. I brought her over to my house, and we had all my roommates there, and we were talking, and I thought, I'm going to show off for this girl, show her how charismatic and funny I am. So I'm making jokes at other people's expense. I'm being sarcastic, because I was at the time, and everybody's laughing, but then also like, please don't make fun of me, but then I would, and I'd be like, right? And then I would tell these big stories about how much of a victim I was in Dallas, because that's what you do to impress people. And after that conversation, Kristen took me out for a walk, and she cut to the heart. And she said, John, if you ever want to have meaningful, deep relationships with people, you have to stop making jokes at other people's expense. She said, if you want this to be a safe, emotionally vulnerable relationship, you got to stop that. You can't do it anymore. Like, it's just not, you can make jokes, but you can't make jokes at the cost of someone else's heart. Stop expecting other people to pursue you. And she said, you got to stop holding on to offense. If you want to make the world a better place, you got to change. She said, you were lonely in Dallas because you were self-centered and prideful while also being insecure and lonely. She said, it wasn't your roommates that were the problem. You were the problem. And in that one conversation, Kristen cut to my heart. She didn't cut through my heart. I want to make it clear. That was a very big summary, very extreme summary of what she said. She said it lovingly. My wife is not a nagger. She's deeply respectful and loving. She brought it to me tenderly in a way I could receive it. But in that moment, she cut to my heart. She loved me enough to make me a better person. And from that moment, I really changed. I mean, I'm going to be honest. Before that point, I was mediocre at best as a pastor, youth director. I was okay. I didn't do a great job. I was okay. But after that moment, I mean, my friendships got deeper. Ministry was so much more effective because she cut to my heart. She saw an issue and she resolved it. She made me a better person. So I think Jesus was committed to making people's lives better. He did it by pursuing people consistently. He did it by dealing with offense quickly. He did it by cutting to the heart. At the end of his life on earth, he was surrounded by his friends. As he ascended into heaven, he joyfully sent them off to create the greatest legacy the world would ever see, which is the Christian movement. And today we're blessed beyond measure because of the work of Jesus in other people's lives. There's a lot today in my message, but I want to ask you, are you, with your life, making other people better? We have some of the lowest levels of relational satisfaction in American history. The world needs people to do this. The world needs people to incarnate, to be the love of Christ. God calls us, in fact, to love like him. I want you to see this. John 13:34, it says, so now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. So you must love each other. Are you doing what Jesus did? Are you pursuing? Are you dealing with offense effectively and quickly? And are you cutting to the heart? Don't waste your life in things that don't matter. Don't waste your life in relationships that are only self-focused. I got a simple challenge today. I want you to do this. I want you to think about your relationships and do this practically. This means pursuing people by initiating a text conversation, asking a question. Hey, how are you doing? I wanted to reach out for you. I'm thinking about you. You're on my mind. How are you doing? Invite someone to be a part of your life, right? Hey, coffee, church, hangout, playground, whatever. Ask questions and listen. I want you to handle offense biblically this week. Where in your heart are you holding on to something? I want you to confront that person, or I want you to forgive that person. I want you to repent for gossiping this week. If you've been doing that, man, I would love that. What a healing thing. You know, I've seen some lines of gossip, and you can watch it happen. You can watch one little rumor, one little line of gossip just streak through a bunch of people who claim to love Jesus, and watch just broken heart after broken heart happen. I would love to see healing come to our church by people who know they have perpetrated the sin against God and a person of gossip, saying, you know what, I want to apologize. I know what I've done, and I know how it's hurt you. Will you forgive me for not respecting you enough to go to you? And finally, can we cut to the heart this week? Can we cut to the heart? I know some of you are like, but John, I'm a boy, and we've been friends since high school, and we have never talked about emotions. It's just not something that we do. Well, do it. Initiate. Pursue. Make your relationship something that is meaningful by asking a friend or family member or loved one, how is your spiritual life going? What if you went to somebody and said, hey, man, I've been a Christian for 10 years, and I'm going to be honest, I haven't grown spiritually in the last 9. What are you doing to grow spiritually? What do you do in your life to grow spiritually? What are you doing to pursue God? I just want to know. I just want to ask. I'd love to learn from you, right? Listen to them. Ask someone, hey, how can I pray for you? What's going on in your life? I really actually care about more than boats and guns. See, here's the truth. I think God created us to be a conduit of his love. The Bible says that God is like living water, and living water means flowing water. His love like flows through us into the world. It's meant to flow through us. And what happens if you take water and you let it flow into something, but it never flows out? It just flows in, right? It becomes what's called a cesspool or a dead sea, right? A cesspool or a dead sea. And I think one of the big problems I see spiritually with people is what we do is we give our lives to Christ, and God's love flows into us, and it feels so good. It's like, I love it. I love church. I'm going to come every Sunday and volunteer. It feels so good. I love it. I love the love of God and Bible reading plan and Bible plans, and this is amazing. And God's love just flows into us, and it flows into us, and it feels so good, but it never flows out. What happens? Eventually, it just starts to turn into a cesspool in there. Right? We just get bloated and full of God's love, and it's rotting and it's dying and it's not living like God intended it to be. And all of a sudden, when you see God, when you spend time with God, it doesn't feel very good, does it? It doesn't feel very good. It's like, oh man, I used to be on fire for the Lord. I mean, back when I did Living Fire Bible Study, back when I did this, back when I did that. I mean, I was on fire. I love God, right? Because for the first time in your life, the love of God was flowing into you, and that feels good. But if it never flows out, if you never step into the next step of relationships, if you never say, God, I don't want you to just work in me, I want you to work through me. If you never step into that, what's going to happen to you spiritually? You will become a cesspool. You'll be dead inside, right? Over the course of time. That's what happens. I just see this right now. We have so many people who became Christians in the last year, right? Most of our church became Christians in the last year, last 2 years. And this is what I'm afraid of is, I got new life in Christ. God's so good. He's moving so much in my life. And then as we just let it sit there in us, we never step into the mission of God for our lives. We never step into the purpose of God for our lives. What happens? We just become dead inside. We become a cesspool. God didn't make you to be a cesspool. God made you to be living water. God meant to breathe life into the world through you. And what a cool thing to be a part of. What a cool mission to be a part of. What a cool thing to look back at the end of our life and see is look how God's love and goodness and mercy didn't just work in me, but worked through me to change the world, right? And look, this isn't just about the world. This is about you experiencing the fullness of God, seeing God work through you, streams of living water. I believe this message is really pertinent to our church today. And it's really simple, but I think there's a lot of us who, man, we were on fire for the Lord X number of years ago or X number of months ago, but today, we're struggling. And it's because we've just allowed God's water, his living water, to sit inside of us. Right now, with heads bowed and eyes closed, just for a moment of contemplation and meditation and privacy, I really want you to take an assessment of your life. I just want you to think right now, is God's love flowing through me to the world, or is it just sitting in my heart? And if it's just sitting in your life, question, are you satisfied or are you a cesspool spiritually? You don't have to live that way anymore. You can say, God, I want to love like you love. I want to make the world a better place. I want you to do great things through me. If that's you, just in a moment of acknowledgement that God's Spirit is working through you, in a moment of commitment to say, God, it's not anymore. I'm going to draw the line in the sand right now. I want you to work through me. If that's you, would you just lift up your hand and say, yeah, Pastor, that's me. That's me. I see that hand. I see the hand. See lots of hands. See that hand. See that hand. See you. See you over there. See you over there. Then you back there. You over there. I just want to pray with you guys who mean business with God right now. Jesus, I just pray for each person who is saying, no longer will I be a spiritual cesspool, God. I want to be living water. I want you to work through me. I ask that you would give each of those people powerful opportunities to incarnate your love in the world. I ask that you would not just make our church where people receive your love. I ask that you'd make it a place where people work powerfully in the world, where your love flows through us to transform this state, this country, and this world. Thank you for your faithfulness and for your promises. I ask you to work powerfully in and through us. In the name of Jesus, all God's people said amen and amen. The band is going to lead us in one more song. I'd ask you guys to stand as we sing together.